back in October in the press conference about violent crime, you had a reporter ask you a question about keeping felons off the streets. He asked, do these people just immediately get out? And you said, well, no, of course, it's not quite that simple. But you identified a couple of difficulties limiting your ability to keep violent felons off the street, keeping them from reoffending. The main thing was that you don't always know about the release of felons on bond. The bond can often be reduced to a level that the violent offender can pay, and then they get out. Of course, they have a right to that, but sometimes we've had incidents where these violent felons have been released on their own recognizance, and then you also mentioned that during COVID, some convicted criminals have been released to house arrest or just paroled entirely. Can you talk a little bit about those problems and what steps you've taken to sort of mitigate or work with other agencies or other parts of the legal system to help with this?
Yeah, thank you. It's a problem that's going on throughout the nation. COVID threw everybody off track, especially in the legal system. You would have those court dates, and we knew people were going to court. Our detectives would be prepared to go to court, and then we would know the outcome, which made it a little bit easier to follow the conviction and even maybe the release. What COVID did was kind of push things back. There are some cases that have been going to be pushed back a couple of years. Based on the fact of the jails being full, and you're trying not to pass the COVID virus in the jail, for safety purposes, there have been individuals who have been released. There have been bonds that have been set lower, which makes it easy for a person to bond out. We're talking 10%. So if I give you a $50,000 bond, that's $5,000. Some of these individuals that we're dealing with, that's pocket change for them, or someone else will either gather, take the money and get them out. They go to a bondsman. So the bonds aren't holding people in jail. A lot of these individuals, we don't know they've been released until another crime has been committed. Well, it's too late then. We've had several of those incidents, our shootings, our homicides, where the suspects were out on bond. Maybe not just here in Pulaski County, it could have been another county, another city. And unfortunately, we didn't know until it was too late. I'm not blaming that on anyone. I mean, the system is just, is overloaded. And so if we could come up with a process to where we were notified that this individual has been released, this person that we've arrested for a violent crime has been released on bond or on recognizance or house arrest, then it puts us in a position to where we would be able to do more intel to see maybe what this person's next move is. We're unable to do that when we don't know where this person is, what the person's status is.
With bond reduction, you mentioned 10% number. Do you mean a 10% reduction of bond or reducing a bond to 10%?
So basically, so what happens is we have no control, and I think a lot of times people get confused and they think that the police department is the one that establishes a bond. We don't establish the bond. We make the arrest. Judges establish the bond, and then everyone who's arrested has a right to a bond hearing. That bond can be upheld or that bond can be reduced. When I said 10%, it could be 10% of what that is. So if we're talking $50,000, they may only have to pay 10% of that.
Gotcha.
They can also get a bail bondsman. I don't know the particulars on that, but their bond, based on whatever process they go through, it would be lower than what the posted bond is, and we have no control over that. So a lot of these individuals, especially the individuals that are committing a lot of these violent crimes, they have access to money. Whether it's drugs, whether it's through the selling of weapons, they have access to those resources and they're quickly bond out.
Why do you think that the bonds are getting reduced? Because I've talked to prosecutors and they say, well, we don't want that either. We're always going for the highest possible bond.
Don't know. I mean, that's something that that's something way out of our control. Have no idea.
Is that something you've seen increase in recent years, or is that just?
That's a problem that's happened throughout the nation, and I think that's going to be a question that's going to have to be posed to judges to determine, because each individual judge has that right. I can't answer that, and it wouldn't be fair for me to answer that question.
Gotcha. As far as not being aware of felons, especially being released, particularly on bond, I mean, it's not always automatic, but a lot of times I can see from arrest reports if these people are out. I mean, I know it's a lot of manpower to keep up with individual felons, but there's no paperwork that you could look up, even if it was some effort to figure out that these people are out?
Well, you got to think about this. I think a lot of people think that a detective deals with one case. Detectives are dealing with multiple cases. It would be very difficult for a detective to follow up on every person that's been arrested or every person that's awaiting bond. We're able to do that in some cases, but we've got some situations where people have been out for a year awaiting trial. It's very difficult to keep up with that when you have a existing caseload. And so that's very difficult to do. There are those that we are made aware of. There are those that we know, hey, this person's out. We're aware of that, but the vast majority of these individuals, they're either in jail for 30 to 60 days, we're working on something else, then they're out. It's hard to keep up. There's just
You're aware of those individuals because you're notified about them specifically, or because detectives are keeping up with them? And
someone will call us and say, this person's out of jail. We saw this person out. Or detectives might be working a case, and then someone might bring this suspect's name up again. I mean, those are how we're finding out. Not the fact that we've got this system that we can just look at and say, okay, this person's out. Some of it's just by coincidence that we find out these individuals are out. The thing I'm most concerned about in several of these cases, it's been once they've committed another violent crime, that's when we realize, and we'll even hear officers say, well, I thought they were in jail. We had no idea they were released, or there were some stipulations to their bond. We didn't know they had broken. So those are the type of things that we're talking about. But I think we have a lot of our detectives. Our department really focuses on communication, and we do communicate more with the probation officers. I know juvenile probation, juvenile parole, juvenile probation officers, we are dealing more with those on a one-on-one basis to get more information that we believe helps us in being able to identify and know where certain individuals who are causing us a lot of problems are.
As far as releases from jail directly based on COVID and COVID overcrowding, Corrections has told me that it's only nonviolent, non-sexual offenders who have gone through a parole board hearing. So is that contributing to this problem, or is it more jail bond side?
I think it's all. I think it's the fact that some of the individuals that may have committed some low-level crimes, like property crimes, we know that there are that potential that some of those individuals, in some cases, can elevate to higher levels of crimes, more violent crimes. So it's not because they say it's a lower level form of criminals. Some of those are individuals that have committed violent crimes we may not even know about. Those are people who were on their way to committing violent crimes. We put them in jail. They were in jail for 60 to 90 days. They're out. Now this is their time to continue to commit those crimes. So it's kind of hard to say that it's not those, nonviolent individuals who are being paroled out. It's kind of hard to say that because some of these individuals we're dealing with would probably be in jail if the courts weren't backed up, or if they hadn't been released based on, due to COVID restrictions. So it's so many different components to this thing. So, it's not just saying, well, this person, we're not releasing the individuals who are violent criminals. Everybody. We're releasing more people based on COVID restrictions and based on parole and probation than we've ever done in the history of this nation. Mm-hmm. So, case in point, I talked to the chief in Chicago. Basically, there's 15,000 individuals in Chicago that are normally under house arrest in the county jail or in the penitentiary that are not in any of those circumstances. They're out wandering. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm talking about.
How's the parole board supposed to know that someone who was convicted on a lesser crime is considering some sort of violent crime?
Sometimes, I don't know. That's a question for the parole board.
You talked a little bit about this in the initial question back in October, but how do you balance trying to prevent felons from committing crimes, especially reoffending, before they do it, and also respecting people's rights to privacy and to presumption of innocence? I mean, you can't just stalk felons.
No, you know, and the main thing I tell officers, we talk about, we have to do it right. We can't violate someone's rights, even if we believe someone is going to commit a crime. We still have procedures we have to follow. When we get to the point that we're violating people's rights based on we think they're going to commit a crime, then we've got a problem. We can't do that, but we can use our data, we can use our intel, and we can use information that we get from the public to determine what's the probability of this subject committing a crime in the future. So all of those go together. So, but you have to do it the right way. We don't cut corners. We can't cut corners. When you cut corners, then something's going to happen, and that individual is going to be back on the street. And if we do that, we're culpable in whatever that person does. And so we're going to do it the right way.
When we're talking about felons, is it fair to say that most of, say, suspects or people arrested in, say, these homicides we've had this year or other violent crimes, maybe where someone was injured but didn't die, how common is it for them to have a prior felony conviction?
Kind of hard to say. We'd have to look at that. Okay. But I will tell you that there are those individuals that we have identified, arrested, or that we are looking for in our crimes that have a background in violent criminal activity.
Gotcha.
Gun crimes, domestic violence, homicide, robbery, crimes against persons. There are those individuals that we come in contact with that have committed violent crimes in our city up to the level of murder that do have violent backgrounds.
Yeah. I think that's probably about our time, but.